Well, hello, listeners. Welcome to Swords, Sorcery, and Synthesizers. My name's Ben Orchard. I'm coming to you from Adelaide.
And I'm Claire Fitzpatrick and coming to you from Brisbane.
And every now and then we talk over the phone about fantasy movies of the 80s. We look beyond the nostalgia to see what is the key to their enduring appeal. We have only 3 rules with regards to what we cover on this podcast. Number 1, it has to have been made in the 80s. Number 2, it has to have some kind of supernatural or fantastical element that defies rational explanation. And number 3, we have to both find it entertaining. Because we're not getting paid for this, are we, Claire?
Sadly not.
Life is too short to talk about boring movies.
Yes.
We hope you find it as entertaining to listen to us, talk about these movies as we did watching them. Now, Claire, do you remember way back when we did the episode on Conan the Barbarian? I opened with a quote from Robert E. Howard, the author of Conan.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind, I'd like to open this episode on The Brave Little Toaster with this poem from the novel by Thomas M. Dish that the animated film is based upon.
Mm-hmm.
Lives there a man with soul so dead, he's never to his toaster said, "You are my friend, I see in you, an object sturdy, staunch, and true, a fellow mettlesome and trim, a brightness that the years can't dim. Then let us praise the brave appliance, in which we place this just reliance, and offer it with each fresh slice, such words of friendship and advice, as how are things with you tonight? Or not too dark, but not too light."
That is surprisingly poetic.
Yeah, The Brave Little Toaster is another one of those films where I guess I have a certain nostalgic fondness for it because I watched it on video when I was a very, small boy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you've discovered it, a few weeks ago as a 30-something woman.
And still enjoying these films.
Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it, or at least I hope you enjoyed it more than Legend, which was the other sort of previous episode we did, where sort of my nostalgia collided with your adult rationalism.
How dare I grow up and have rational thoughts? Oh, horrible. And yet I still defend movies like Gothic. So, you got me there.
Anyway, to Brave Little Toaster, which is a
Mhm.
very sort of strange film,
Yeah.
based on a very sort of strange novella. I mentioned it was written by Thomas Dish, who is quite a distinguished science fiction writer whose body of serious adult work I have never read, I'm ashamed to say.
Hmm.
Probably best known for On Wings of Song and Camp Concentration, which are very sort of bleakly dystopian visions of the future, I'm told.
Yeah.
I've heard some people say that he was like an influence on the cyberpunk movement. I have no idea if that's the case or not, because the only thing I've read by him is The Brave Little Toaster, which was
Mhm.
originally published in the magazine of science fiction and fantasy in 1980, and then issued as a picture book in 1986. And then there was this sort of very small animated film that was made of it.
Yeah.
I think that it was originally going to be a Disney production, but then, I don't know, the company sort of lost faith in it for a while, and a few of the animators went off and did it independently. And then
Yeah, it's a very Disney vibe.
and then Disney kind of brought back the distribution rights.
Yeah.
And then after that, sometime in the 90s, after the film had developed a cult following, Disney ended up producing a couple of direct-to-video sequels.
Mhm.
One of them, Brave Little Toaster to the Rescue, was an original screenplay. The other one, The Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars, was actually loosely based on a novel that Thomas Dish wrote in 1988, I think,
Mhm.
as a sequel. And that's one of the strangest books that I've ever read. And it's one of the uh, strangest, direct-to-video animated films I've ever seen too.
When I thought about it, I'd actually had heard of Thomas Dish only because we um sort of worked in, the same kind of field. So he's won awards that I know about, and then I have friends who won about. So there's the Hugo Award he won, and the Nebula Award, and the Riesling Award or Riesling Award, and I know all about them. And so when I kind of looked into him, I thought, wow, like, I have friends who won those awards, so maybe I have that really cool kind of connection in a way.
But
So that was cool.
you've never read his books either.
No, but that was just interesting to note that he won awards that I know about, and I'm close to people who won those awards. So that was really cool.
Well, I know that there's some debate amongst literary critics about whether The Brave Little Toaster was meant as a kind of satire of
Hmm.
the literary conventions of children's fiction, or whether it was just meant as a straight up example of it. Because
Yeah.
because what Thomas Dish did with this novel, I think, is he took two common tropes of children's fiction and sort of combined them together. There's the first one is, the convention that toys are secretly alive, and whenever no one's watching them, they come alive and are sentient and, get up to all sorts of adventures on their own when
Hmm.
their owners aren't watching them. And you see that in everything from, like, Hans Christian Andersen's The Steadfast Tin Soldier up to, like, the Toy Story franchise, for instance.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And
Toy
the
Story. Yeah. Well, Toy Story was the first film that I instantly came to mind, and for a long time, I thought, that was one of the original kind of toy coming to life movies. Um, because like obviously I know about a lot of, older animation, but I don't know, like I feel like I'd heard about the Brave Little Toaster, but just I think I'd forgotten about it. And then when I watched it, I was like, wow, this is like a really cool precursor, albeit darker version of toys coming to life films like Toy Story.
I was going to say that the other sort of convention Thomas Dish played with in this story was the convention of, I don't know, loyal pets
Hmm.
who are separated from their owner and go off on some sort of long cross-country journey to be reunited with their owner.
Yeah.
And, you see that there's a long tradition of that from, like, Lassie Go Home to I guess, the Homeward Bound movies that, Disney made in the '90s. I mean, I'm sure that there's many, many others you could think,
Yeah.
but basically what Dish did was sort of combine those 2, conventions. So you have this world where home appliances like toasters, vacuum cleaners, desk lamps, uh, clock radios or whatever, whenever the humans aren't watching them, they come alive and they have personalities and they, do all kinds of crazy, wacky things. And in this story, we have, a bunch of appliances who are, left behind when their owner moves house. And
Hmm.
rather than just, stay behind gathering dust, they decide to embark upon this, cross-country odyssey to be reunited with their owner.
Yeah. And I thought it was really cool. Like I thought it was really interesting because each of the appliances had their own, their own characters. They were like people. And I liked the fact that, you know, there was like obviously the toaster, the radio, desk lamp, electric blanket, vacuum cleaner. And there was, also, was it the air conditioning or the heater? I think it was the air conditioner.
The air conditioner who
Yeah, yeah.
very
And I liked, yeah, and I liked that they were all different. And I really liked the grumpy, discouraging air conditioner because he kind of made me think of maybe like, a grumpy parent or, be careful, don't you go doing these things, and you stay where you are, be safe or
the funny thing is in the film is that he's actually right. Like,
Yeah.
says to them, "You don't have to go on this, like, cross-country road trip. You should just sit tight and wait, and, if he comes, he comes." And, like, at one point, like, the owner does actually come to take them back because, like,
Mm,
their owner was this small boy, and he's, going back to the house to, get some appliances to take with him to college. And,
mhm.
yeah, so if they had just stayed put for another few days, then, they wouldn't have to have, gone to so much trouble, but I guess it wouldn't have been a very exciting movie if they'd done that.
Exactly, and there wouldn't be that cool, I guess, sci-fi car of the office chair, the battery, a car battery, and, the power switch thingy.
Oh, yeah. Yes, they're electrical appliances, and they have to charge themselves up constantly, so they have to rig up this sort of, yeah, this sort of battery-powered desk chair, like, thing that they can use to sort of propel themselves, across the countryside. It's,
Mhm.
yeah, it's quite inventive, it's quite strange. Uh,
Yeah,
you mentioned how all of them have different personalities, and it sort of relates to both their function as appliances, but also their relationship to, the master, to the, uh, well, to the
mm,
old boy they think of as their owner anyway. Um,
yeah,
like, the blanket, the electric blanket, who was probably the child's old blanket, has the most sort of childlike personality of them all.
yeah,
Vacuum cleaner is the sort of like this loud, thunderous, grumpy grandpa voice.
yeah,
And, the radio is sort of like this loud, brash sort of DJ, but sort of like fun-loving and always making wisecracks. And then you've got like
mhm,
the desk lamp who's coming up with bright ideas, and then you've got the toaster that is like warm and comforting and is like the I don't know, the teen mum in a way.
yeah, and I like that because I think, while they're all brave, it's a toaster that pulls them together. And I like that, again, they all become the heroes of the story. That the toaster is the one that, gets them through their journey, who is like, keep going, um, and I think that was really cool as a representative of even like with kids movies where there is, a ragtag trio of, ragamuffin, then there's always the one who's like, keep going, you know. So I liked that.
Well, yes, this sort of ragtag bunch of misfits, and they
Mm,
and yes, the countryside that they, traverse through, they
mm,
a lot of, like, weird, strange obstacles and sort of, you know,
mm.
really, crazy wildlife and environmental hazards, and you described it as dark earlier. I mean, I suppose some of this was sort of a bit more distressing or scary than it might be for I know compared to kids' entertainment today. I mean, what do you think? You're a mother, you've probably watched a lot more sort of entertainment
Mm.
that's geared towards very young children than I have.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, when they're kind of crossing like the waterfall, everyone kind of falls in, I think, except Kirby. They're trying to recover Blanky, and then it ends up that Kirby ends up, getting stuck because he dives in and rescues the others. And I think it was really great because then the rest of the group tried to like pull him out of the swamp. And then there's like this big like quicksand that almost sort of follows them up. And I thought that was really dark and and actually made me think of Ned's story. The swamp of sadness.
Well, the horse sinking his swamp. I can
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's also a really bizarre dream sequence where, like, the toaster imagines he's being dropped into, like, a bathtub or,
Yeah.
chased by a killer clown with a fire hose. It's sort of I don't know what they were trying to achieve with that. It's not in the novel, by the way.
Hmm. Well, oh, that's interesting because that made it so much more darker. And the whole toaster in the bathtub, I was like, "Ugh, that's pretty dark as well." So I guess maybe that was appealing to adults. Um, it made me just think, who is this movie for?
I think
Mm,
it's a combination of back in the '80s, I guess, children's films had more faith in the idea that, kids could take a scene that is a bit scary.
yeah.
Talked about films like Return to Oz on this podcast that have, very dark elements, but still have sort of child protagonists.
Yeah.
I guess also, as you say, they wanted to put things in there that would appeal to an adult audience. And
Mm.
like I said, Thomas Dish is best known as an adult writer, or
Yeah.
a writer of fiction for adults, I should say. So the thing is, as I said, a lot of people argue about whether The Brave Little Toaster was meant as a satire or as a sincere children's book.
Mm.
I think it actually the novel, I would say, actually works as both. I mean, he has this sort of, sharply ironic writing style, but the prose is quite amiable and the language is simple enough for, young children to understand. I think
Mm.
if you, I don't know, read The Brave Little Toaster to your child at bedtime, they'd probably enjoy it. And
Yeah.
the adults reading it would, have a bit of a chuckle at how he's playing with literary conventions here, but it's not
Mhm.
something that impacts the entertainment of it. And as for the film, I guess the thing is that the film doesn't really present any of these situations ironically.
Yeah.
It does just, like, wear its heart on its sleeve in terms of sincerity. Like, as absurd as some of the, like, visuals are for the appliances, like, getting themselves cross country, like,
Mhm.
it really, you know, earnestly presents their journey as something, sincere and, uh, you know, something, that the audience should invest in emotionally. Like, it wants you to care about these appliances.
Mm. Yeah. And I think that's something that I really liked as an adult watching it as well, because I could pick up on that. And of course, the kids as well, they're going to be, hoping that they make it through all these obstacles, and find their master. Um, but this I found odd, that actually made me think of Bluey, the children's TV show. It's very critically acclaimed. And I watched it with my daughter, who is 2 next month. And in it, it's clearly written with the idea of the knowledge that adults will watch it with their children.
Right.
And so it has these themes that are kind of underneath the childish stories that they have. And so Brave Little Toaster sort of made me think of that, and that there were these undercurrents of real danger and real issues that if you watch it as an adult, you're going to get and understand, but it's still going to be enjoyable as a child. And yeah, it doesn't really dumb things down. But again, different comparison, but that's just what it made me think of.
Well, I think that's the mark of good children's entertainment is that it doesn't talk down to its audience.
Yeah.
It works on more than one level. It works on the level, that if you are a grown up, you can get something out of it.
Mhm.
Regards to the film and what it changes from the book, it in some ways it makes the story more dark, and in others it makes the story more light. When I say that it makes it more dark, there are a greater number of obstacles that the appliances, face on their journey, and a lot of them are more extreme.
Mhm.
A lot of them are more sort of like you really worry whether they're gonna come through in one piece.
Yeah.
So that aspect of their journey is a bit more harrowing.
Mm.
The ending is a bit more optimistic. In the end of the book, they, find themselves at the apartment of their former owner and realize that they're not needed anymore. He's got new appliances.
Mhm.
And they end up with a different owner because, like, the new appliances that are there, they help the old ones find a new owner, and
Yeah.
they end up with an owner who is, a former ballerina who's
Mhm.
basically, over the hill and her dance career's over, so she's sort of a bit obsolete, but she's a nice old lady and she's getting by, and they end up with her, and
Yeah.
it's sort of poetic justice because, like, they're these sort of slightly out of date appliances who still have so much to offer, and they're with this old woman who, you know, she's past her prime, but she's, still a nice lady, and she's, you know,
Mhm.
making a good life for herself. So yeah, it's sort of a bittersweet happy ending. Whereas in the film, they are reunited with their old owner and
Yeah.
come to live with him, and he fixes them up. there's a scene where, like, the toaster is almost, and this isn't in the book, by the way, like, the toaster is almost smashed in a, like, garbage disposal thing,
Yeah.
and, and, he does it to sort of save his master who, might be, crushed in it too,
Mhm.
and, that doesn't happen in the book, but anyway, the owner, like, repairs the toaster,
Yeah.
and, yeah, so they all end up happily reunited with the owner, and they get a couple of direct-to-video sequels with him.
Yeah. Well, that's so interesting because obviously I haven't read the book but I did like the more darker ending, well, I guess not ending, but when they're at the junkyard and, they think Rob no longer wants them. And then the big terrifying electromagnet. I was like, this is a pretty scary face. And, it's gonna drops them on the crusher thing. And I thought that was, yeah, like that was really scary. And obviously it made me think, of okay, you're at your lowest point, but then there is someone there who saves you, so Rob saves them. And that makes me think of, like, the older lady, thinking, you're alone and you pass your prime, but there is someone there to kind of rejuvenate you and save you in a way. Do you think
Yeah.
that's maybe, like, one of the themes of the story or something different, I guess?
I'm sure that it is. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that, I don't know why the changes were made or what the logic behind it was. I think that both of the stories work in their own different ways.
Yeah.
That in some ways, because the stakes were raised on the
Yeah.
on the journey, they wanted a more overtly happy payoff after the kids had been dragged through all these potentially traumatizing scenes.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was like, can you imagine children on the edge of their seats, faces glued to the screen, going, "Oh my god, what's gonna happen?"
Well, I used to be one of those kids. I mean, I'm trying to think how old I was when I first saw this, if I was 8 or 9. I wasn't that
Mm.
young, I suppose.
Yeah, but that's young enough to be scared by something like this. I definitely think it would be scary.
Like, my brother's 4 years younger than me. He'd probably have been he watched it with me, as I remember.
No,
And
not nightmares about giant magnets. They're gonna put them under the crusher.
I guess the thing is that whenever, like, we watched a movie, we would always talk about it with our parents.
Yeah.
You know, whenever there was a scary scene, we'd always talk through it, and, you know, w we always understood that, like, as scary as it looks, it's just make believe. It's just
Mm.
like, if you're watching something distressing happening in a movie, it's just a special effect. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about, in an earlier episode, the, death of the horse Artax in Neverending Story, and
Yeah.
how people often joke about how traumatizing that is for young children,
Well, yeah.
but when I first watched it and, discussed it with my parents and, it was a sad moment, but, like, they were able to reassure me this is just a special effect, like, they didn't
Mm.
really kill the horse to make this movie.
Mm. Well, I think it's actually good that then I guess you can have conversations about things like, death when you're younger, the possibility of death. So that may seem kind of dark, but again, with 80s sanity films, those darker themes are there. And kind of learning about these things as a younger kid, kind of, nothing will prepare you for things like this. But I think, yeah, as we're saying, a lot of films now just don't really have those aspects. So yeah, I was really happy that this had this kind of, like, moment where you're thinking, "Oh my god, are they gonna survive? Are they gonna make it?" Even though part of me is like, "Of course they will get saved," but I don't know, there was at that point, and I was like, "Maybe not. Is this trying to teach us a lesson?" So,
Well, I think the film was just trying to create suspense, and if
yeah,
they succeeded in creating suspense, e
yeah,
even within the context of a sort of whimsical children's film like this, then
yeah,
I'd say that they're doing something right. But
yeah,
what you mentioned before about experiencing these kind of stories as a family, I mean, I
mm,
think it's important for parents to discuss just their children's media consumption more generally, not just with movies, but with, like, books they read or TV shows they watch or
yeah,
whatever. Just talk about it with your children and,
yeah,
see that they're engaging with the themes on the right level, and, it can Look, it can just be an interesting conversation starter. I mean,
Mm.
you're a mother. I mean,
Yeah.
you probably have, you know, more experience in sort of helping your children process media. I mean, would you agree it's just a healthy rule of thumb generally is to just take an interest in what your kids are watching, not just park them in front of a TV and, okay, do
Yeah, of
watch
course.
something?
Yeah, and although it is difficult to talk to my almost 13-year-old now about what she's watching, because she's so disinterested with my own life, I like taking an interest because I like sort of seeing what she's thinking about
Mm.
and what shows are teaching her or yeah, well, what she's learning about. And of course, being that massive age difference between my children, it's really interesting to see the dichotomy of their learning experiences. So seeing this little almost 2-year-old watching these things and watching these scenes with these colors and sounds, and then watching an almost 13-year-old watching similar things, and it's really interesting to see how their views change on things and their perspectives, and also how my older daughter now sees these cartoons that she watched as a kid. And then it makes me think of us and us talking about, you rewatching these and me watching things the first time, and it's just a very good conversation starter, I think, which is good.
Well, I think when you have had, life experience as an adult, you look back on certain stories with a different perspective. And
Mm,
certainly when I look at the character of Rob, their owner, who's,
mm,
you know, just about to embark upon going to college or uni as we call it here. And he's got a girlfriend and he's sort of just moving out from his parents' house. And he's thinking, "Well, I'll bring some old, like, cheap like a toaster or whatever for the dorm that I'm staying in," and that sort of thing. Like,
mm.
that's an experience that I could relate to, you know moving out of home and going to uni myself, when I
Yeah.
late teens, but also, like, you see the adult characters in this,
Mhm.
whether it's the worried mother who, getting ready for her son to leave the nest, or whether it's, like, this, you know, eccentric guy who runs a used appliance store and, drives monster trucks in his spare time. Uh, one of the, yeah, weird and wacky characters the appliances encounter on their journey. But,
Mm.
yeah, you can relate to all these other characters differently, but also, I think I see in this group of appliances a kind of family unit in some
Yeah, me
with
too.
the toaster as, like, the nurturing mum of the group in a way. So
Yeah.
so yes, in some ways coming back to, these kind of kids' films, you can get a new perspective on it as an adult.
Yeah, and I think also seeing, the boy obviously growing up, he's ready to go to uni, and that made me think of me, even though I started uni when I was 20, still young. I'm still incredibly young, that's still you're experiencing this kind of freedom for the first time, and I liked that, and I think also even the appliances were experiencing another kind of freedom, even though it's not the freedom that they wanted. They didn't want to be left behind by the master. And I don't know if that's sort of what it was also about, but I kind of thought about that as well. There's, and maybe not freedom as like a great thing, but like a scary kind of adventure, and I guess that's what the appliances go on. And, they have that freedom to venture out into the world to find Rob as well. So I like that aspect. It's made me kind of think of myself.
Okay.
It's cool. Yeah.
So so I think we can agree, like, on a thematic level that The Brave Little Toaster still holds up as a enjoyable film. I'm just wondering what you think of it on a more technical level?
Hmm. Well, I actually really liked the music as well. And I think there was some parts of it where I thought maybe were a little long. But then I thought about when this was made and there was, a lot of singing, a lot of, yeah, musical numbers, I suppose. Um but I thought that was really good, and I liked that because they're just not used to that now. You have stuff like Frozen and there's singing and things like that, but there's not extended, scenes of singing a musical and, yeah. Oh, I really like the, Cutting Edge, I think is that the song?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
song
yeah,
the newfangled appliances brag about how great they are.
yeah. And maybe think of Talking Heads. 'Cause I was like, "This is really cool."
It's kind of funny when, like, the newfangled appliances that are bragging about how great they are kind of dated now. Like,
Yeah,
I think one of them's like a VCR or something.
yeah.
But anyway, I was going to mention the music. The music is a bit different from sort of, I guess, the standard sort of Broadway sound that you might expect from Disney movies these days in terms
Hmm.
of songs. The person they got to write the songs was a guy called Van Dyke Parks, who is sort of more of an indie songwriter. He's probably best known for his collaborations with, like, Brian Wilson at the Beach Boys, including Smile, and he released his own sort of, quirky cult, concept album called Song Cycle.
Hmm.
But yeah, Van Dyke Parks is probably not the person most people would think of to do, like, the songs for a cute animated film about toasters and such,
Exactly.
but he did, and he came up with a pretty good score. The instrumental score was by a guy called David Newman, who
Mhm.
is also probably best known for, like, live action, comedies and things. I think War of the Roses was one of the things that he did, uh,
Oh,
the
cool.
soundtrack for, but he did do the soundtrack later for another animated film called Anastasia.
Oh my god, I love Anastasia.
In the ni
Yes, it's one of my favorite, like, childhood movies. Oh, that makes so much sense. That's really cool.
Oh, I think David Newman might have done the soundtrack to Matilda as well in that.
Oh my god, that's cool as well. Awesome. It makes me appreciate it even more. Like, obviously, I really liked it.
Yeah,
But that's cool.
he tends to do the soundtracks to really odd films. I don't know this,
Yeah.
but I think the thing about David Newman's score though is, again, it's so sincere. Like I mentioned,
Mm.
like, there's not much, like, irony to all this movie.
Yeah.
That in that it's a pretty, like, wacky premise, but it's played so straight and so sincerely. I guess I would say that a lot of more modern sort of Disney and Pixar films, would have probably presented something like this in a more ironic way.
Yeah. And yeah, and another thing we've mentioned before is everything it's much more sincere, like heart on sleeve with these sorts of this music as well. And it is more childish, I think, as well. And it's like, well, it's aimed for children. Probably should have more kind of childish kind of music as well.
Well, you mentioned pacing and you mentioned the animation, and I'm just
Mm.
thinking of, like, the opening sequence where they have the sun coming up on this log cabin and then, like, all the appliances waking up and making an effort to keep the house tidy even though their owner isn't around,
Mm.
which I wish my appliances would do,
Yours don't? Mine do all the time.
but, um but yes, so it's actually probably, I think, 10 minutes or so before we get any sort of meaningful dialogue happening.
Yeah.
I guess it's such an extended opening, and, like, I'm just thinking, would modern children's films have trust the audience's patience to sit through all this? I mean, it's got some good establishing character moments and everything,
Hmm.
but it's like, maybe it's just that I'm getting a bit old. I find a lot of, like, more modern children's films when I've watched them with, like, my niece and nephew have been a bit more frantic or a bit, I don't know, a bit brisker in their pace,
Yeah.
shall we say.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely kind of dubious if a film came out now with an extended kind of musical piece in the beginning. I think a lot of time we talk about children's attention spans not being as long as they used to be. Whether that's to the way they consume media these days and everything is like quick and replaced by new things. But I did like that because it made me think of movies that I watched as a kid, like in the 90s. And maybe it could have been a little long, but I do think it was endearing and it was nice. So it was fun. So yeah, definitely a different kind of beginning that are in films now for kids.
I don't know, the quality of the animation as well as something else, I don't know, I'd like to touch on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hand-drawn animation, I believe.
Mm, yeah. It
Uh,
looks like it. Yeah.
I mean, how can I say this? I think that the designs are very striking.
Yeah.
Even if the animation itself, like when the characters move, is sometimes a bit clunky.
Mm.
And and I don't know how much of that was intentional, the clunky movement, because they are appliances out of their element after all. So
Good point.
maybe it's kind of fitting, but it's also as much a product of it being a low budget animation, I'm sure.
Mm. Yeah, like, that could be the reason. It could be, like, limitations and, just the ability to what they could do during that time, but it didn't bother me or anything like that. I thought it actually made me think of in Beauty and the Beast, how, the cutlery, the candlestick, the clock all come to life, and the kind of way that it was very animated, but still a little stiff in parts, but it didn't detract me from it in any way, so yeah, I just sort of thought of that film, and I thought it was still really good. Oh, yeah, I wasn't bothered that it was a bit clunky.
Yeah, I guess generally I find that if I have an attachment to the characters and the story, and if a film is well acted, I can generally, like, be more forgiving of some sort of slight technical deficiency.
Yeah. I think also that's something that we talk about quite often, but, if the content is really good, there are some things that maybe don't work quite as well, whether that's, like, direction or if it's animated. Um, but as long as it's got heart and soul and, again, you can really tell that it's endearing and you can tell the people who make it, the animators are putting everything into it. It doesn't bother me at all. It's still compelling and fun and it's somewhat, surprisingly emotional, especially during the end.
And yeah, it's got heart and it's got
Yeah.
soul and it's got a brain as well. I sup
Yeah.
I think, yeah, The Brave Little Toaster is something of a sort of hidden gem when it comes
Mm.
like 80s animation. And
Yeah.
even, I don't think its sort of legacy has sort of been tarnished either by the sort of direct-to-video sequels that it had. Yeah.
Mm.
Both of which I've seen, by the way, and yeah, Brave Little Toaster to the Rescue is quite harmless as far as these things go. It's
Yeah.
not on par with the original, but it's a fun little, like, I don't know, time filler of a movie, and oh, and the Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars is just a like it's like an acid trip of I mean, I'm just like, "How did this get funded?" But, I mean, I read Thomas Dish's book, The Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars. It isn't as effective as the original because I don't think it has that crossover appeal of, like, children and adults that
Mm.
the original has. I think with Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars, it was obvious that Thomas Dish was very much writing for adults.
Mm.
The central plot is that there's this, disgruntled refrigerator who's been designed with a planned obsolescence in mind.
Mhm.
Very angry at being tossed on the scrap heap, so he gets together with some other sort of discarded appliances, and they build a rocket ship to Mars, and then they establish their own base on Mars where they build this robot army with the aim of, like, taking over Earth and exterminating humanity.
Well, that's dark.
And then the toaster and his friends end up transported to Mars in
Mhm.
a really complicated way that is just ridiculous. But anyway, the toaster ends up having a debate with the fridge about, whether appliances and humanity can coexist in harmony or whether they should destroy each other. Yeah.
Okay. That is a deep philosophical debate that I would not think of being in children's movies.
Well, that's the thing. The movie sort of sanitizes a lot of this, but it still keeps like the refrigerator and his robot army. Uh,
Mm.
Mars. Yeah, Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars is just incredibly bizarre. And like Disney had this trend, for a while of doing like direct to video sequels to all their animated classics.
Yeah.
And, like, of all the things that they would, like, do sequels to, like, they did sequels to, like, Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid and Aladdin and The Jungle Book, but, yeah, they also did, a couple of Brave Little Toaster sequels, and
Hmm.
they actually, like, took on the challenge of Thomas Dish's book, which is just, yeah. It's basically this screed against capitalism is my interpretation of what Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars is about. It's this, like,
Hmm.
allegorical attack on capitalism, and
Well,
it's really strange that that got a, like, direct-to-video Disney film adaptation of it.
considering Disney is a capitalist corporation. That's, like, super cool. Then I think, yeah, there are those odd kind of animated films where they're really about something else completely, or there are undertones of things, Cold War-esque films and, ideas about, I guess, invasions, and I think it's also because during the time period in which they were made, and these were topics, and maybe because they knew adults would be watching it, like, I don't know, they get something out of it, get a bit of a kick, or teach children about, I don't know, communists are bad, but I don't know.
Going to say that I think children's entertainment had a lot more faith in terms of challenging children.
Yeah.
And than children's entertainment made today. Although I'm less informed about that than you probably are, because you are exposed as a mother to a much broader range of modern children's entertainment.
Yeah, and I think the shows that I really like and that I do allow, I guess, even my younger daughter to watch are ones that encourage intellect and thinking. And again, my younger daughter's only 2, and we don't spend a lot of time watching TV. We're usually outside with the chickens, and I get her to help out with, the garden. But when we do watch something, I make sure it's something that has an aspect of learning, has an aspect of like wonder, and is bright and colorful. Because and this is why, like, she watched Brave Little Toaster with me, and
Good, okay.
yeah, yes, she did. Like, she wandered off a bit here and there, but there were scenes that kind of captivated her, and she's pointing, and she has a shocked face. She's like, oh. So she's yeah, she can talk a little now, and she's very like animated with her gestures, and
'Cause
but there are a lot of shows.
you said your daughter's 2, right?
Yeah, well, she's 2 next month. She's 2, but there are a lot of children's shows that just don't have that. They just can't just this, formulaic kind of story, but Brave Little Toaster, I think, is a really good example of something that has all these aspects to actually reel children in, but encourage a sense of wonder, especially as, teeny tiny babies. I thought that was really cool.
Whoa. Yeah, Frankie, that's your daughter, was
Yeah.
younger than I was when I discovered Brave Little Toaster, so I'm amazed that if it held her interest for even, like, a minute, then I'm
Yeah. Yeah, well, like, yeah, she'd wander off and then come back and, yeah, point. I'm like, "Yeah, that's the toaster or that's the vacuum cleaner." And but that was cool. That was still cool that she was able to look at it and be engaged in some way, um, which was a really cool little bonding experience for us, and I definitely will watch it with her again when she's older. I think that would be cool.
that's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm going to say Brave Little Toaster, yeah, if you can find it anywhere, it's not very easy to find these days.
Mm.
I mean, I think you can still get it on DVD. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere. I mean,
No, I can't find it. I looked it up because I was just interested, so yeah.
it is very sad that, Thomas Dish's novels have gone out of print, by the way.
Oh, really?
The books,
Oh.
you can't even get them as ebooks,
Oh my god.
audiobook. That surprises me. Like, I thought that with the film being, like, a cult movie at least,
Hmm.
there would be a sort of demand for, like, an ebook reissue or something of the books, but no, they're out of print now, and if you can find them in a, like, used bookstore or anywhere, snap up a copy because, they're very hard to come by. They're sort of collectible items now.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's really sad that you can't really get it, anymore because it's really fun, and I think that the covers are really cute and whimsical, and
Yeah,
um
the illustrations by Karen Schmidt in the original books are really they're very different from the film, but
yeah.
They're very pretty. And I also think that, maybe it's just that, as I said, Thomas Dish is best known for writing like dark dystopian science fiction,
Mm,
stories. And because it's very different to his regular work, maybe there's not, that much of a demand for it, or
mm.
they might find it hard to market,
Yeah.
when an author's known for like writing something in one specific genre and then they do something else, then, a lot of publishers think, well, how are we going to sort of sell this to either his regular readers or like the new demographic?
Um, I think, yeah, it's an example of maybe, like, publishers should have taken a bit more of a chance and perhaps, like, we've said back then with films that filmmakers did, but I don't know so much if publishers did, which is unfortunate.
I don't know if I'd want to see like a remake of it or any sort of.
No.
I think if it is so much a product of its time, I find it, I think it would be incredible if it did get any kind of resurgence, but then so many, like, old IPs are getting resurrected, maybe I shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Well, what would it be, like the first sort of flip phone? Like things that no one really has anymore. Although they've been having a resurgence. Um, you know, the first iPhone.
The brave little flip phone? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Or, the iPod, as I was saying, or oh no, the MP3 player. Oh my God, I had one of those when I was maybe like 14, 15. But that'd be cool, you know? Something like that. And that's still I think as it shows it's still like the moral of the story and it's still the meaning of the story. And that it's still relevant now.
What is the moral of the story? Good, I think that's what I liked about The Brave Little Toaster, actually, is that I don't think it had a moral. When I was a kid, I never felt like I was really being preached to.
Hmm.
I guess if there's any sort of message that the movie or the book has, it's that, like, don't take things for granted, like, appreciate
Yeah.
small things in life, like the small joys in life, and also just, I don't know, don't be wasteful, like, don't throw things away if,
Yeah.
they're still potentially useful. I guess that's, like, the vague sort of message you could get from it.
Yeah. Well, perhaps morality wasn't the right word, but now you're saying that, it makes me think of all four different things of, climate change and the products that are just being wasteful and not being able to be recycled in a fast fashion. And that's like a whole other conversation. But it's like, yeah, the fact that things aren't made to last anymore and people don't really like appreciate things that they already have. And that may be far more deeper than, the book and the film. But that's what I was thinking about. I was like, is this, I don't know again if moral is the right word, but is this maybe something that people could take away from it, even if it wasn't the intended
Mm.
theme? But I thought that as well. I was like, oh, this is sort of about, things are constantly replacing other things, technological advancements for the sake of advancing.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe a bit too deep for a children's book, movie and book, but again, my mind started to wander as I was watching it.
I don't know, I think that's a good message we can take away from it, and
Yeah, yeah, I think so too.
I guess a good note to end this podcast on. I know that as an adult, I'm sort of reluctant to throw things away a lot of the time, especially, books, even books that I don't really read that much anymore, and like it
Hmm.
drives Cheryl, my partner, crazy sometimes that I'm so slow to sort of throw things away, and, maybe watching this movie as a youngster, had
Hmm.
me.
Yeah, and we never know again. Yeah. But yeah, like we never know. I mean, watching film when we're younger, and we may not pick up on things as we said, but when we're older, we might think, yeah, that really kind of maybe do something different, or maybe appreciate something different. So, I think it's cool. I think it's really cool, still relevant, and I do hope that other kids are exposed to film like this or get to watch it and just because it's fun. It's just a fun little rescue story, fun little adventure story.
Yeah, right on.
That's all for this week, folks. Thanks for listening. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing and sharing this podcast with your friends. If you have any questions or would like to provide suggestions for future episodes, you can send an email to fantasypodcastfeedback@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.